All right. Welcome, everyone. Great to be here today. Thanks for joining me regardless. I'm Rob Tatro from robtatro.com, portfolio manager here, Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management, and at the Tatro Wealth Advisory Group. Thanks for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please take a sec to like or subscribe or share. Let's bring in our guest today right away, Jessica Morehouse. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So Jessica Morehouse, she's a speaker. She's also a financial counselor. She runs the Mo Money podcast. She's had I think 250 or something episodes. She's been on BNN Bloomberg, CTV, CBC, and a whole bunch of other places. We're thrilled to have you. She's from not so sunny Toronto, Ontario today. No, I don't know. Is it sunny out there?
It's actually really sunny today. It may not seem like it from my room because it's very dark, but it's very sunny outside.
Let's talk about some of the advice that you give and see kind of regularly. So you work with individuals, probably young couples, I would imagine, or young individuals. What are some of the stuff that people come to see you for? First, let me start with that.
I'd say the biggest section of the clients that I work with are actually individuals. And a lot of them are millennials, either men or women. Typically women. I work with a lot of women. And a big reason that they come to me is they find themselves kind of in the spot that I was probably when I was at 30 and realize, I'm making okay money. And I feel like I've checked off a lot of that kind of adult, checklist. I live in the city. I've got a good job. I got my degree, but I have no idea what I'm doing with my money. And I feel like time is just going by so fast and I'm terrified of making a mistake. And I just need someone to guide me. I need some guidance. And so that's what we kind of do together. We take a good look at what do they want? What are their goals? And figure out how can we achieve those goals through saving, budgeting, paying down debt, and investing.
What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see or have seen with some of your clients or just millennials generally?
I'd say the biggest one is not recognizing that you need to take control of your finances. A lot of people, and this is something that I used to think in my early 20s, that, I think you're just supposed to hire somebody and they just deal with it all for you. And as you, kind of learn more, well, you still have to be very much involved in your own finances. So you can hire somebody, but they're not going to work on your budget. You have to make sure you're on budget, that you're making good spending decisions, that you're basically responsible for your own financial life. And that's kind of a big thing that I think a lot of people may not recognize, or when they recognize it, they're terrified that they've missed the boat, that's too late for them. And that's another thing I hear. They're like, is it too late for me? It's never too late. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can always pivot and change course.
I sometimes start working with individuals that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are kind of just, now figuring out that they need advice, they need planning, they're starting to save, something's happened in their life that they're no longer in the same spot they were before. And I always tell them the exact same thing. It is absolutely never too late to start looking at that budgeting, saving, and investing for sure. So you work with the millennials. I'll keep calling them millennials because I think that's what I see. That's what I see all over your blog and all over your website. So do you sometimes wish, and maybe this is my pet peeve, and this is probably a rant I've done before, do you sometimes wish there was a better kind of foundation at the high school level or even before that to help all of us Canadians to be better when we're adults?
100%. I feel like there should definitely be more programming in high school. No one talked to me about money in high school. I entered college or university and I didn't know what a checking account was. How was I smart enough to get to university and get, pretty good grades and not know what a checking account was? This is crazy. I feel like lots of this stuff could be integrated into math. A lot of the scenarios integrate some sort of, personal finance element to it so that you have context, or just make sure that there's some sort of programming in high school and, talk about things that are relevant to kids. Because I was working in high school, I was making money, I was saving money, but I didn't really I don't know if I was responsible as I could have been had there been more education. And then same in college, there was absolutely nothing in college that I knew of. And so for me, it wasn't until I graduated university and then was kind of shocked to be like, oh, how do I find an apartment by myself? What's a credit score? How do I get, there's all these questions that kind of, hit you all at once when you're like, okay, you're off on your own. And it was very intimidating. And I was lucky in that I did have an older sister, 3 years older than me. And she started educating herself, reading personal finance blogs. And that's how I honestly found out about the world of personal finance. If it weren't for her, I think it would have been years later that I would have picked up The Wealthy Barber, like everybody's read, and kind of, started their kind of personal finance journey. So I feel like this definitely needs to be part of the conversation a lot earlier.
You think everyone's read it, but way less people than you thought have read it.
That's true. That's true.
We need more people to read it. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
being the younger sibling is definitely a plus. I was the youngest of three. My brother Charlie and my sister Tanya were always kind of in the space ahead of me, and they were always teaching me things. But I mean, I remember in high school, I took an entrepreneurship course where I had to, in a small rural school in La Broquerie, Manitoba, I call it Saint-Joachim. We had to like create our own business, and we had to actually take it through and get some actual revenue. And we had a not ping pong, what are they called? A picnic table. We created picnic tables and we sold them. We had to figure out pricing. We had to figure out what it would cost us and labor and marketing. And well, I knew how to do that, but I didn't even know, how to open a bank account, right? And I was learning that. So I was like, okay, they're trying to teach kids how to start a business, which is fantastic, great. But let's have something somewhere. And I think math is it's a good idea. Maybe someday when you're prime minister, you can get that changed.
I never want that job. I'll tell you that right now. But thank you.
Kidding.
I'll take that as a compliment.
So let's go back to the advice piece that you give and on the budgeting side. So what are some of the big piece of advice that you've given to young millennials for budgeting, just strictly budgeting?
Yeah, you know what's so interesting? I used to kind of hate the word budgeting. I always budgeted as soon as I kind of figured out, hey, you need to do this in order to have clarity with your money. I always had a spreadsheet since like 2010 is when I started doing that. And I tried lots of different things. And at a certain point, I did feel really restricted and didn't really like what I was doing. And then I've over the years kind of evolved kind of my strategy. And what I usually say to most people when I bring up, we have to make a budget together, they're usually very resistant because they think a budget means they have to stop doing some things they really like to do with their money. They're going to have to make some sacrifices. It's very negative connotations when it comes to budgeting. So I usually like to reframe it in a couple ways. Maybe instead of calling it a budget, call it a spending plan. It's really just for you to outline, okay, let's figure out what is your net income so we know how much money we're playing with and where do you want it to go? And then it's really up to you to decide where you want it to go. Do you want to go to savings and what kind of savings goals do you have? And I usually start with the goals part because it's way more exciting than talking about expenses. It's like, these are fun things like going on a trip, a wedding, down payment, retirement, all those kinds of things. And then breaking down your different, expenses into fixed and variable. But when I create that with the client, the really important thing, especially with your variable expenses, and I think a lot of people think of budgeting as you really have to categorize things. So you can only spend this amount on groceries, this amount on eating out, and this and that. Usually what I do is like, let's look at your spending so we can get some real numbers, see what we need to actually fix. Maybe you're overspending in some areas based off some averages that I see. And then let's give you, in those categories, some kind of loose amount, but really it's just figuring out how much should we allocate to all of your variable expenses, and just don't spend more than like $700 or whatever is the amount. It's getting away from this itemized way of budgeting because it just doesn't work for people. We don't live and spend that way, and switching it up. And also, I think what's really important for people to realize is a budget can be in so many different ways. Like the budget, system that I create works for a lot of people. There's lots of other budgeting ways that may work better for you. So it's all about trying different things and seeing what actually sticks.